Hi everyone. Thank you for joining this new session of the Supply Chain Leaders webinar series. Today, we are very excited to be with L'Oréal, the world leader in beauty. Thank you to the speaker, John Saxby, who is Group Head of Sales and Operations Planning at L'Oréal. The presentation will last 30 minutes and will be followed by a 15-minute Q&A session. So please do not hesitate to ask your questions throughout the webinar in the Q&A section of your screen. And now I'm going to hand it over to John to start the presentation.
Thank you, Neri. Thanks everybody for joining. It's a great pleasure to share with you this short presentation that I've entitled Future Master as the backbone of our demand planning process, and through which I'm hoping to share with you how we work with the Future Master as we transform our business in order to win in a digital world. Just a quick overview for some of you who may not know L'Oréal so well. Yes, we're a global leader in beauty. We're a relatively large company with some 90,000 or so employees, around 27 billion euros of sales, growing quite strongly, and with a very large e-com business at 11% of total turnover, growing at 40% a year. And we have quite a large portfolio of products, 65,000 finished goods products that we forecast, with about 7 billion units being sold every year. So a pretty complex planning environment to be working in. And we're also very proud not only of our business performance, but also the fact that we are rated regularly #1 in sustainability development. So the Carbon Disclosure Project rates us AAA 3 years in a row, and very proud of the ethical reputation of the company with the Coveline ethical quote score #1 as well. So a very a business based very much around not only doing things well, but doing the right things. Just a quick dive. Oops, if the slide will move. There seems to be a slight hiccup in the switching of slides. I was just going to share with you, whilst we get that slide changing, the fact that within L'Oréal is actually what we call a flotilla of global brands. We have some 60, hang on, the slides are changing now. Here we go. So we have a flotilla of global brands. We have about 42 worldwide brands, you can see on this, chart, in 4 divisions. So those divisions are around the luxury division. We have a mass market division. We have what we call the active cosmetics division, and we work very much with professional hairstylists. Again, many of these brands have been acquired, and they bring with them some varying cultures, varying actual specificities of how the business is run, and we have to integrate all of that into our global planning process. Demand planning is absolutely key to our business as a growth driver and a growth enabler, and L'Oréal prides itself on its ability to grow. And the reason demand planning is so important to us is because it provides 2 very, very clear roles. It provides the visibility to operations, of course, in order to allow us to synchronize the demands with our ability to supply, but equally, it provides the confidence to the business in future turnover and allows the business to make better choices on how to secure growth and how to respond to the needs of our consumers. But the world is changing. In fact, I always say the world has actually already changed. It has become far more real time. People want things, people are impatient. We are consumers, right? And we're all impatient. I always say that a few years ago, waiting for 4 or 5 days for a delivery from Amazon was good. Today, if you don't have it same day or next day, you think that it's taking too long. So we're becoming very impatient, and our consumers expect us as a leader to be able to respond. Equally, the consumers themselves, I call it the selfie-driven fast beauty mindset, where people regularly are wanting to look great, to post photos on various social networks. And that, of course, is leading to a desire for choice. A desire to have specific colors, specific shades for certain times of day or night or year. I cannot believe how often I see my wife on Facebook looking completely different from one day to the next. But she uses these products, she wants these products, and she wants them to be exactly in line with her needs and her wishes at that point in time. So this is driving a huge expansion in our portfolio and the complexity of the products that we have to plan. And of course, from an operations point of view, the consumers, all consumers, are still looking for perfect service. Customers are looking for perfect service, but they want it with less stock. And equally, the world in which we're operating is becoming more volatile and uncertain. And whether that's to do with global trade situations, supply constraints, whether it's to do simply with the ability of our factories to manufacture this increasing complexity, the challenge is increasing, and that brings with it additional needs and additional requirements placed on our planners and our planning solutions. And finally, the people, so the planners themselves. I don't know how many of you recognize this situation, but despite our continued investment in training, in tools, in processes, and we have some fantastic members in our teams, there's a clear pressure being put on human performance, and it is becoming increasingly difficult for our teams to deliver the service that we expect in this environment, which is becoming significantly more complex. So where does the relationship with FuturMaster fit into to this equation? Well, the first thing to say is that FuturMaster is our single worldwide demand planning solution. You'll see in a second the deployment map, but we've been working in a strategic partnership with FuturMaster now for many years. And we have been able, through that strategic partnership, to deploy a tool, but also to adapt the tool to fit with different business needs. And whether that's a global brand being forecast at worldwide level, which is the case in some of our brands in the luxury division, or whether that's a local brand that's forecast at a country level, or anything in between, we have now developed solutions within the FuturMaster tool that allow us to do the demand planning for that. We've also been able to integrate the reporting, and as many of you will know, the ability to convey the message of what the forecast is, the ability to explain the performance against the forecast, all of these things are critical to maintaining credibility in the demand planning process. So we've been able to integrate our reporting in FuturMaster with the needs of the wider L'Oréal processes. And the other great thing about it was that we've developed what we call a 360-degree rollout project methodology. So when we deploy FuturMaster, we not only deploy the tool, but we deploy a whole process, we deploy the data alignment around it, we deploy the new roles, we explain to everybody exactly what level we're forecasting at and why. So we really do start to use the tool as a means to transform the business. And I come back to the point around our deployment. So, we say it's the single tool for demand planning across L'Oréal. Well, we have 98% of our 27 billion euros group turnover, which is now planned through FuturMaster. So 550 demand planners are actively building forecasts in the tool. And in total, 3,500 users are connecting using data that's coming from the tool. And that's across 90 countries around the world. So you can see on this map, it's pretty well everywhere, including our travel retail business, which is a multi-geography, airport-driven organization. So very, very well deployed. And it's our core solution, right? So we have standard worldwide solution that we apply as at the base. So that's a common tool for the group, integrated in a common way with the other solutions that we use across functions. We have deployed it everywhere to simplify the way that we use, we train, and of course we call it versioning, which is the development of functionalities. Once you have the core tool, you're able to deploy very quickly worldwide anything new. And as I say, we've also developed these different models that adapt to each business, which allows us to demonstrate the value of FuturMaster into new brands when we acquire them and into new geographies as we deploy to them. So the core parts of the solution are really around the baseline statistical modeling. And as you'll know, in FuturMaster, there are many options for doing this. and we basically deploy a small number commonly deployed algorithms in order to do the stat modeling. We then are a very promotionally and launch-driven business. We in L'Oreal, we change about 30% of our catalog every year. So a reminder of the 65,000 SKUs, that's something like 20,000 SKUs per year that we have to deal with through launches. So we have some very specific processes around that. And we integrate with SAP. We're an SAP organization, our business planning tools in the sales teams, and our financial planning tools with finance. And where we adapt is really around things like whether we run weekly or monthly buckets, depending on the nature of the business we're in. We're increasingly adding sellout as information, and most recently developing solutions to allow us to forecast sellout. So we call it double modeling. So we can forecast sell-in and sell-out and look at the differences between the two. And of course, we're able to deploy the solution flexibly at the right modeling level. And it's important because a lot of our businesses historically have tried to forecast at every level, every customer, every country, every warehouse, every brand, every business. Well, actually, what we're finding is that sometimes that quest for detail is leading to a deterioration in performance. So when we deploy FuturMaster, we set out with the business to define the right modeling level to give us the best possible forecast performance for the business, but also for the supply chain operations. But it's not all about the tools. And this comes back to the point on a 360-degree deployment methodology, because for golfers out there, if you give me Tiger Woods golf clubs, I don't play golf like Tiger Woods. A lot of the performance also comes through the ability of the teams, the training of the teams, the processes they work in, and the behaviors of the business that they're in. So we don't just deploy the tool. An example, I'm going to try and share a video now. Technology is not my forte, so this may or may not work, but I'm going to try. Just as an example, of the importance of getting the right context for the tool. As you know, what we do in L'Oreal is we use the demand planning solution of FuturMaster to create the forecast. And then with the business, we look at that forecast, we assess the forecast, and we validate the forecast. And that validated forecast becomes the one number that goes through into the rest of the supply chain planning operations. So what I'm going to hopefully do now is to share with you a little video that I took of a L'Oreal validation meeting not so long ago. It appears not to have sound. Do you want to try it with sound? So essentially, the forecast is showing the business in decline. The demand planner there at the front, and his business says to him, I don't agree, we should be showing it in growth. Okay. And this is a very common challenge that we face in our businesses, because we're an ambitious business, we're a growth-driven business, and sometimes that demand planning process does show that we have some gaps between the reality and our ambition. And a lot of the time, the pressure is there to, I call it, to force the number to meet the aspiration. And as you'll know, it's absolutely key that in the demand planning process, we provide a neutral and unbiased forecast. So what we do with in L'Oreal is basically we deployed what we call demand planning excellence as with FuturMaster as the tool that sits within that. So demand planning excellence was started about 5 years ago, and it was a project that was owned by the business, supported by operations. And the first thing was that we had to build the process framework for demand planning. So what were the group guidelines? What were the roles and responsibilities? What is the role of the business in demand planning excellence? What are the inputs of data from the business that we use? And how do we drive the right quality and availability of data for use in the process? So that's what we launched. As you can see, the demand planning excellence program is actually in a number of phases. It starts with assessment. We go through the deployment and training of the cross-functional teams. We then, after a period of time, have a second assessment to see just how much of it has stuck. And then once we're happy, once we're clear that the process is in place and the tool is working, then we have continuous improvement that goes on behind that. A key part of all of this is the upskilling of teams. So we also have specific demand planning training and demand planning self-assessments that we've put in place to support the demand planners, the 550 demand planners around the world, in order to also allow us to share good practices and to build teams to go and look at where we need to improve, where we need to drive specific focus on process. There's also the demand planning community, which is animated from the Global Center, which again, not only is it seminars and training, but also newsletters and good practice sharing that allows the teams to feel connected around the world to this one solution. So we almost try and generate, one process, one team, and one tool. And what we see when we deploy FuturMaster through this enhancing the people, their performance, is that we do have benefits. So we have seen up to 20 points of forecast accuracy benefit, and our forecast accuracy is measured at SKU level on a 3-month horizon. So I know a lot of people use a 1-month horizon, and we have a standard of 3, and we've seen up to 20 points. And we also have seen in other examples where we've deployed the solution. After a period of time, we've come back and done a self-assessment. Performance has dropped off, and when we've gone back in, we found that the performance drops off because of the people, the process, but rarely because of the tool. So it's very easy to kind of blame the tool, but actually when you go back into it, what you find is you haven't trained your teams properly, they aren't using the tool properly, or they have a contextual issue with the putting pressure on the number to make it match a financial trend. So very good performance comes from it, and when we stick to it, we see that sustained performance. There's one big challenge, I've talked about it a bit, I call it the HiPPO effect. I don't know if anybody has heard of that, but it's something that next time you're in a forecast validation meeting, it'd be really worth just keeping an eye out for the HiPPO effect. The HiPPO effect is this one. It's the highest paid person's opinion. And the challenge there, of course, is that the highest paid person, quite often the most senior person, is not always the most data aware person, is not always the most knowledgeable about the inputs and the assumptions that have gone into the forecast. But this person often has an impact on the final number that is validated. And it's very important that through the robust demand planning excellence process, the robust and proven performance of the tool, that we can convince the business that decisions must be based on data and fact and not by opinion. So this is something that I'm pretty sure all demand planners, if you ask your demand planners, will also experience, which is that pressure that comes on them when the number they've generated after months and months of work is questioned by somebody who believes that they know better. And you're going to say to me, that's great, John, that all sounds very good, but what about the digital revolution? What's going on? Well, what we look to is China. So for our business, China is a real hotbed of growth, of challenge, of consumer choice, of expectation, of technology. And so this graph here just very quickly shows the online sales of our mass market business in China. That's the red line. Okay, the blue line, if you can see it at the bottom, is what we sell through other counters, basically. And straight away, what you see is you see the volatility that is coming through the e-commerce channel. And I remind you, again, the number I gave you at the beginning. Today, we do about 11% e-com worldwide and about 40% growth. In China, CPD, the mass market business, they're currently doing more than 50% of their sales on e-com and growing. So this is becoming more and more the norm for us, and it would be challenging enough looking at that chart if it wasn't for the fact that they also in China have a special event called 11/11, which is an Alibaba special event day, and that's not on this chart because that's the impact of 11/11. And as you can see, right, 50 times the sales increase, 5.5 million parcels that we need to ship in 5 days. This is a real challenge. If we get it wrong, you get the picture on the right-hand side. And this has to be planned, right? This has to be planned. and this has to be planned at a level at which we can actually start to manufacture and produce to get the stock in the right place in China. And again, geographically, China is not the easiest place to ship product. It's a very, very large country. So again, we have to be really planning this in advance. And again, so we use the demand planning process to create this forecast to maximize our ability then to spot any deviations from this forecast. And we have been relatively successful in supporting these spikes. And these spikes are due to continue. So we put more and more pressure on how do we manage this volatility in our demand planning process. We're also testing this real-time demand-driven technology. So a lot of people call it artificial intelligence, machine learning, demand sensing, all of these things. So we are testing it. We are looking at how can we become more real-time in the sensing of what's happening, whether that's those spikes I've just shown you, whether it's new consumer insights or trends. And those new insights and trends in today's world can clearly come from any geography. We have a lot of focus on social networks in Korea for makeup, for example, which seem to set trends that then propagate out to the rest of the world. So we're looking at sensing those things early and seeing how can we capture those trends and how can we best prepare for those trends. We are becoming much more demand driven, which means we're integrating sell out as far as we can, wherever we can. So whether it's through our own stores, whether it's through our counters, whether it's through e-com channels, whether it's through the partners, customers that are prepared to share data, we're looking at how can we include this real demand-driven data into the forecasting process. And we're looking at how can we share this information more quickly across the chain with all of our supply chain partners to ensure that everyone is having this visibility of what's going on and everyone can prepare simultaneously. And we're going to get out of the old sequence of doing cycles of demand planning that throw it over to supply planning, that throw it over to an S&OP process, throw it over to a factory, and throw it over to a supplier. We need to start to become much more synchronized in what we're doing. And our teams benefit because we can then use this information and we can use the capability of technology today to automate a lot of the work that they currently do. And by automating that work, we can free up their time to work, to spend with the sales and marketing teams on new launches or with new promotions or with acquisitions or with new distribution channels and doing the stuff that's really value adding more so than the number crunching. But again, I come back to this really key point, right? And we say, let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. What I'm trying to say here is that new technology is sexy, right? So everybody wants to be doing new technology. But new technology doesn't mean that everything you have today and everything that you do today needs to change, right? Some things can be improved, yes, but the core of what we do, the core of how we do demand planning and how we align the business and how we validate numbers and how we stat model, those kind of things do still remain. So I think it's very important that we don't get too distracted by that. So how are we working with FuturMaster to prepare for this this tomorrow, which in a way is already out today, but let's call it tomorrow. So we clearly see FuturMaster and the demand planning process as the frame which will allow us to drive the key fundamentals of data readiness, process readiness, and the ways of working readiness. Right? If the data is not right, if we don't have timely data, if it's not clean data, if it's not complete data, it's impossible to do anything in terms of technology. It's impossible really to run the basics of the process. If the process isn't defined, mature, if roles and responsibilities aren't clear, then the tool itself cannot solve those, right? So we have to use the deployment of the tool as the opportunity to fix the process and make sure everyone is aligned to the common goal. And the ways of working needs to be right. If despite excellent work by our planners, despite the integration of all of the assumptions, the use of FuturMaster's demand planning to create the forecast, if somebody is allowed to come along and overwrite that based on their opinion, then again, all of the great work is lost. So we have to get that ways of working readiness right. So the second thing is we're always looking at how can we develop the functionalities, how can we improve the functionalities, develop new functionalities. And we have a process of this versioning, so the new functionality development, which we do in yearly waves. and we spend time with our teams and we spend time with the business to understand the changes that are going on so that we can identify where to put the focus for these new developments. And then because we have the common solution, the deployment goes relatively quickly across the organization. And that's something that's a point which is really important, because when we are talking about the Future Master solution and the improvement of, we have a view of what we need. We know pretty much how business is changing, but we're not always the experts in what the right solution is and how the functionality can be developed. And that's where we have to work very closely with the Future Master team to define these solutions. And we have twice yearly formal meetings with them to identify the new technologies that we need. And we have very close working contacts with the team directly to make sure that anything that's happening, we stay aligned on. So I think that's really important for us, that we do have this kind of opportunity to share our needs, but also to be humble enough to listen to how others see the ways of solving those needs. And we have to be clear that whilst we know quite a lot about our business, we are not always the most knowledgeable about all of the technology. So we have to work together on that as a partnership. And the other thing, the final thing that's really important to me and to the team, is that we do have this Future Master customer community where we get together quite regularly. We also now have the customer boards where a number of the clients of Future Masters meet. We discuss together our challenges, our successes, how we're using the tool, how we're trying to be innovative with the tool. And to be honest, and I say this each time that I see Bo and the team, sometimes we use those opportunities also to request focus from Future Master. We kind of gang up a little bit on them, but that allows us to really work in a way that is transparent and honest, and allows us to move forwards together. So I think all these different levels, whether it's within our organization with the planners, whether it's with our own Future Master teams here who specialize in it, whether it's through our networking days, whether it's through our peer connects, whether it's whatever it may be, we see this as a kind of an ecosystem of people with a vested interest in how do we get the tool to be as good as it can be, and how do we get the tool to deliver as much as it can for L'Oreal. So my final slide, I think it's a couple of key takeaways. The first one is we see the real value in having a core solution to drive worldwide performance, but also to drive the scale and the speed of change, of innovation and of improvement. And it's something we've worked on quite hard for a number of years now. We've got to that 98%. We're very pleased with that. And I think, therefore, we should now reap the benefits of having one standard process, one standard tool, and one standard way of working. The second thing I'd say is it's very easy to get caught up in the tool, but fixing the planning fundamentals first to avoid the let's say rubbish in, rubbish out. You can translate the S for another word. Is very important. If we implement any tool on top of bad data, we will get just expensive bad data. We need to make sure we fix the data, we fix the training of the teams, we fix the environment in order for the tool to be successful. And when we do that, we do see the results. The enablers for digital, when everyone talks about sexy new digital solutions, actually when you come back to basics, the enablers for those digital projects are exactly the same as the enablers you need for getting great demand planning today. Right? So again, I would stress the need to get those enablers right, to work on those. Our deployment of Future Master has been a great vehicle for fixing a lot of those enablers. That means we're now in a much better position if we do want to go ahead with more advanced machine learning and digital solutions. So there's a real benefit in the deployment of a tool to fix those fundamentals whilst you're doing it. Share the vision as well. I mean, it's important for us that we have a vision of how we want to transform L'Oreal into what we call a beauty tech organization. So we're always going to be focused on beauty and the beauty expectations and needs of our consumers. But we're very clear that the way we'll do that best in the future is being much more tech savvy, much more digital, much more data driven, and we need to share that with key partners, because it's with those partners that we can co-develop solutions. And we know, of course, that we're not the only ones with a digital vision. So we also know that those partners have their own digital roadmaps, their own innovation pipelines. So it's crazy not to try to connect together and to then to share those common goals and to work together on common solutions. And finally, my point would be start now. There's a lot of people who hesitate over, are we ready? What's the right solution? You know, where do we start? What should I do, one thing first or wait for another thing? The problem is the world is moving so fast that if you wait to try and find the perfect solution, it's pretty clear that something else will come up in the meantime, and then you'll start the whole debate again over, well, actually, should I now start on the new solution, or should I go with the one I previously chosen? The best thing you can do is to pick something and start. If you've got something that exists already, if you already have a solution that's available to you, you know, you're already on a FuturMaster solution, then see what you can do with that. Because I'm convinced that starting now, doing as much as you can now, you know, accepting that it won't be perfect, because actually we're all learning, right? We're all learning in this digital transformation. Accept it won't be perfect, but doing something is better than doing nothing. And we'll all then start learning together. So that, I believe, is the end of my presentation. So thank you for those of you that hung on till the end. I appreciate the confidence you've given me in spending time with me on this WebEx. And now I'm open for any questions.
Yes, thank you so much, John, for this great presentation. So let's start now the Q&A session. So we received many questions from the attendees, and we're going to try to respond to as many as possible during this 15-minute Q&A session. So the first question is this one. So who owns the accountability for the forecast accuracy?
That's a good question. It's always interesting to start with the tough one. Because I think everybody who's involved in demand planning and forecasting knows that there's always a bit of a debate about who's accountable. So when we launched Demand Planning Excellence at L'Oréal, we were very clear that the ultimate accountability for the forecast, for the number that went through into the operational planning systems, was the business. And for us, that was the general manager of the brand or the country that was validating the forecast in a forecast validation meeting. And that ensured that we had a level of accountability from the business in doing this. Of course, it's the demand planners who build the forecast, who run the stat models, who integrate the data from everywhere, who have meetings to validate with everybody, and who share with that validation meeting performance, risks, opportunities, and ultimately the number that they present. So, you know, you could argue it's a shared responsibility, but the ultimate accountability for that forecast and therefore for the accuracy sits with our business.
Okay, so the second question is the following. So how do you manage collaboration with other departments such as marketing, sales, finance?
Yeah, another good one. Again, another good one around process and ways of working, because all of these groups, these teams, these people contribute to giving the demand planners the right assumptions that they can then build the forecast around. And so the way that we do it, we've built it through our demand planning excellence process, which is defined around a number of key steps, a number of key moments where assumptions are provided. Demand planners integrate them into the modeling in FuturMaster. They then generate the reports that they then validate. And there are a number of pre-meetings to validate, mainly with the brands, because we're very much a brand-driven organization, but also then on events with the key customer teams, so that we have inputs from both. And that's done through the pre-demand validation meetings. Then ultimately with the higher level management committee, marketing, sales, and finance, they're all involved in this validation meeting. And that's the point at which we ultimately get the true collaboration on setting the final number. So it's in the monthly process of demand planning excellence with the inputs, structured inputs of all the different functions that lead to that validation meeting at the end. That's how we drive the collaboration.
Okay, so FuturMaster is the demand planning tool for 98% of L'Oréal Group turnover. So when will this reach 100%, if it will?
Yeah, I should have just rounded it up to 100 to avoid the question. No, the truth is it's pretty much deployed everywhere. Yeah, there might be a couple of very small markets where they currently don't have the solution. The reality is, those markets are so small that we will get to 100% when we move further down our stated aim of going more to centralized forecasting. So we are developing solutions now where we will cluster countries, or we will cluster regions, and we'll forecast at more aggregated levels. So whether that's aggregating one of our brands like NYX for the whole of Europe, whether that's aggregating one of our brands like Atelier Cologne for the whole of the world. As we aggregate those brands, we move more and more to a position where FuturMaster is the only solution. What I would just say, just to be very precise, we're acquiring businesses as well all the time, and sometimes we acquire those businesses and they don't currently use FuturMaster, so there might always be a small gap, just simply because we buy a business and for a period of time it's not using the FuturMaster solution. So, but no, for me, you could pretty much count it as fully deployed already.
Okay, so you have 550 demand planners and 3,500 users on FuturMaster, which is actually quite impressive. So how do you manage this?
Yeah, this comes through the animation. We have a fantastic team here in the global center. We have a specific FuturMaster team. Their job is to make sure they're on top of all of the developments. They lead the developments, and they share that with the users. So we have key users in all of the zones and divisions. So they share that back through those key users. Those key users then align the demand planners that are using the solution in their zones and their divisions. So we do it through a cascade and a virtual network, if you like, of teams. But we also then have very regular training. We have seminars every year. We have a couple every year. And we have what we call an advanced FuturMaster Users Day once a year, where we bring those key users to Paris, and we spend, it's normally 2 days, but 2 days where we will then give them the very latest on the versioning, the very latest on the new learnings. We'll share experience. And so we really empower them to go back into their zones and divisions and lead the teams. So that's how we do it with the 550 demand planners. With the other users, many of them are actually connecting to use data. We animate them less. We're very clear on the data and the structures that are available. We have lots of documentation on how they can access that data, but they're left pretty much autonomous to use the solution. We focus on the 550.
Okay. Okay, so maybe it's linked, this question as well. So can you tell us a bit more about your demand planning excellence process, process?
Yeah, sorry. So I touched on it. I mean, it was launched 5 or 6 years ago because we were really starting to struggle with forecast accuracy, and that was leading us to miss out on sales and not satisfy our customers. So it was a global program taken very, very seriously from the very top. Just to give you an example, once we deployed it, our own CEO, Jean-Paul Agon, was sending every month a note to his heads of zones and divisions about the forecast accuracy and where he believed certain people needed to give it a little bit more focus. So that's just to give you an idea of where this started, at what level it started. But it was very much around a business transformation. So we went in, diagnostics were done, an understanding of the current state of the planning solutions. And then what we did, we implemented the monthly demand planning excellence process with those meetings I referred to earlier that connected in all of the functions of the business. We put it in place, we deployed the tool, and then we ran with self-assessment. So we actually, even today, 5 or 6 years later, every year, every business does a self-assessment of their demand planning excellence solution. And we also have an assessment that is done on the use of the FuturMaster tool. So both in process and in tools, through the demand planning excellence, we animate that today. We still keep that live, and we still make sure that it is the reference for how we do demand planning in L'Oréal.
Okay, so we have 3 minutes left, actually. So sorry for the people who ask questions and that we won't be able to answer. Sorry about that. So still a couple of questions though. So among all the challenges you mentioned, so what is the biggest one when implementing a demand planning process worldwide?
It's the governance. It's that video of getting the business to truly now trust and take decisions based on data, particularly where you're a very ambitious business. We're all ambitious businesses, right? And being able to be honest about where there are gaps and then deal with those gaps requires the whole business to be focused on data-driven decisions, and that's not always something that has existed in L'Oreal because we're ambitious. We like to strive to do better. Sometimes you have to also be honest and you have to accept there's a gap and you have to then focus on that. So getting that governance right, getting that behaviors right is absolutely key, because if you don't do that, then everyone just starts to lose faith in the process and lose faith in the tool, because they know at the end of the day they're going to get overwritten. So getting that right, getting the commitment from the business is the number one enabler for getting everything else to work well.
Okay, so you gave many advice in your presentation, but if you had to give just one key piece of advice for implementing a demand planning tool worldwide, so what would it be?
Just one. Probably take me 3 minutes to think of just one. No, I think I honestly believe that to deploy something worldwide, you have to go people, process, and tools. You have to do it in that order. Get the context aligned with your teams, with your people while you're doing it. Get the process aligned on how you're going to use data and take decisions, and then get your tools adapted to that. We did that through demand planning excellence, through the choice of FuturMaster as the tool. And I think that's the reason that FuturMaster is the only tool that L'Oreal has been able to deploy worldwide. There is no other core solution that is deployed on 98% of the turnover of this company. And I think that's because we used that approach. We picked a partner, we stuck with that partner. The tool works, and therefore it has been relatively straightforward to replicate one deployment after another, which is why we are where we are today. But get the people right, get the process right, pick the right tool, and then you'll be able to get yourself a global deployment.
Wow, thank you very much, John. It's 45, so we're finished. Thank you so much for this really great presentation and for your insights. So we're very much interested in having the feedback of the attendees on this webinar. So please take a couple of minutes to fill in the evaluation survey that you will be receiving shortly. You will also receive the recording of the webinar by email by the end of the week. Again, thank you everyone for joining this webinar, and we wish you a very good day or evening.